Okay. So everybody, we were muted. We're going to start all over again. So thank you for telling us that at YouTube, Decatur A, Atlian. Thanks for doing that. We're going to start all over again. So we're going to just start 1, 2, 3. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izzo. We are live here from Lindencraft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show, lots going on. New administration. We're messing with the markets, going up and down, fluctuating quite a bit. We're also having an audit in the government right now. And beyond that, they're trying something new with tariffs, which we've never experienced, at least in my lifetime, and probably in most of your lifetimes as well, of what's going on. And a lot of people are asking us the question, how is this going to affect the mortgage market? And how is this going to affect the housing market ultimately? So I needed to find somebody who was quite knowledgeable. And so we've talked to him a number of times before. A lot of people I could talk to, but I brought back Chris Coy, who is vice president on the board. I don't senior loan officer. He's got so many titles. It's hard to keep up with what he actually does. Here's the thing. He's got a really great position at TowneBank, and he knows a lot of stuff, and he helps a lot of people, and he knows a lot of people. So did I get all those right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Humbly, I just keep trying to do good things for people, and
yeah,
opportunities open. So
yeah, and as you help people, you get to know more people and more people. So big question out there. New administration. We're almost at the end of the first quarter of a new administration.
Yeah,
they've done a lot of things. They've pushed a very heavy agenda, and they've done a lot of things. Some people agree with it. Some people don't agree with it. That's fine. We're not here to judge you whether you agree or don't agree. That's okay. But what people want to know is, how is all of this going to affect the mortgage industry? How is this going to affect the housing industry? I know that you guys, all the banks and lending institutions kind of talk behind the scenes about what may or may not happen. Can you give us some help here?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. There is a lot going on. I do want to say these are my personal views and ideas about it. And, I do, I've spent time with this a little bit. I do have a degree in finance.
You say a little bit. I mean, you got a degree in finance, a little bit. This is a little bit more than just a little.
So just making sure that you understand that it's really challenging taking the economist role. Like, people give the economists a hard time. They can give you 150 reasons why everything happened, but they can't tell you what's happening tomorrow. So that type of view, we've had a lot going on. And in a nutshell, getting to the point is, this should be really positive for both the housing market and the rate market for a couple of reasons. All of these things going on right now with tariffs, with a lot of different changes going on in the markets. Wall Street, if we go back into the middle of last year, I don't think Wall Street necessarily expected things to go this direction at that time. And at that point, the Fed had been changing gears and was moving to not necessarily raising interest rates, the federal interbanking offering rate. At that point, they changed gears to potentially lower it 4+ times over the next, the coming year. Still trying to get inflation down. That was their goal. And at that point, money started flowing, out of equities back into bonds, which, as bonds go up, mortgage interest rates go down.
And before I have you go into that, I think, can we do just a quick re-education for people who go, I only really know that there's a number on the mortgage rate. Can you help me build that connection between bonds and equities? Because you're gonna use these terms.
Yep.
And there's some people out there who are kind of really new to this, and can you give them a simplified
Yeah.
understanding of how that, because I get it. You get it. We're in the industry, so we understand it. But there's a lot of people who don't. So help us if you can. Do a
Absolutely.
do a
quick
101.
Yeah.
A 101 on it. Yeah.
Real quickly on that. So jargon, there's not a lack of jargon in everything we're talking about today. And it's complicated if you're not in this all day,
Right.
every day. And when people get a mortgage and they send a payment to the bank, generally most mortgages, the vast majority of mortgages out there, are delivered to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were taken into receivership during the mortgage crisis. They're technically owned by us, the taxpayers, and the government. So those mortgages, for a lender to lend money on a house, if you want the best rate out there and have normal type of setup, meaning you're, see either self-employed or W-2, and you're putting some money down and you have normal type of setup, almost all of those mortgages go to eventually get delivered to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And that's how the lenders recoup their money. As a bank or a lender, you can only lend out a certain multiple of your reserves, or deposits. So as you lend money out, you would eventually run out of money. So what happens is your mortgage, your beautiful mortgage with your great interest rate, when you get the keys to the house, that loan is literally packaged next to hundreds or thousands of other loans just like it. And that package of loans is delivered to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or Ginnie Mae or one of the main entities. And it's delivered in what's called an RMBS, a residential mortgage-backed security. So you deliver those loans to the GSE, the government subsidized entity, and they basically pay you back for that. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac don't do mortgages. You can't go to them and say, I'd like a mortgage. They securitize them and they put them out to market where people can buy those RMBS securities, residential mortgage-backed securities, or bonds, or UMBS, universal mortgage-backed securities. So your portfolio, a retirement account, other countries around the world can buy and invest in residential mortgage-backed securities that are backed by real estate collateral in the United States. And it just so happens, since the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were taken into receivership through the government, they're also backed by the U.S. government. So if those mortgages were to fail, really the government would have to fail as well, or stop backing that, which really, in my mind anyway, doesn't make them a whole lot different than a U.S. Treasury type security. So it's one of, if not the most vanilla, safest, conservative investment instruments that are out there. So when I say bonds, and you're wondering where the mortgage interest rate comes from, as people pay more for bonds, the less yield you need to have on them, and the rate that's required to support that goes down. The less value you have in the bond, the less people are willing to pay for it, the more interest rate or yield you need to cover that. So as the bond prices go up,
interest rates should put pressure on interest rates, push down.
The rates go down on it, and so they work in inverse.
So what we're seeing right now, just for everybody out there, what we're seeing right now is that bonds have held pretty steady, maybe increased a little bit in value, which means that's pushed down on the rates. It's putting pressure on rates.
That's putting downward pressure on rates.
Putting downward pressure on rates, just so everybody is playing at home. And so now we're sitting here, and so we look at that. So now, everybody's, thank you for doing this little, collegiate 101 bonds and equities education. Where does that put us now in the mortgage home house industry right now? Because while bonds have held steady and maybe even increased a little bit, we're not seeing a whole lot of change
In the
in
rates.
the rates.
So right as that happened, normally it's a bit of a smooth, predictable glide path.
Right.
And when, the arc, if you will, of the graph is kind of predictable, you can play into that pretty easily. But right now we have a bit of a jagged,
right.
We're up today, we're down today,
Right,
we're up
right.
today. So if you go and look at the equities market over the last week, you've had some of the largest intraday volatility in quite some time. So money's going into bonds, money's coming out of bonds, like it's all over the place. So money's going in and out of equities as well. So it's created a lot of volatility. And in finance, when there's a lot of volatility, people, like big entities that control all this stuff, they don't jump to sell or they don't jump to move quickly.
Right.
They take a step back and reassess what's going on. So instead of, okay, bonds are up today, and then tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., the interest rates are down, they step back and say, okay, so where is it settling? There's a lot of volatility. Say we're up, we're down, we're up, down over the last couple days. Where does it look to settle? So they don't move quickly to put the portfolio at pressure, to get picked off, so this volatility has almost made rates go up a little bit, because the market, so by the time the bonds are up or down, it takes a couple days for that to flow back into the mortgage before it actually hits the market. So all this volatility actually has it up a little bit with line of sight to being lower when it settles. So right in the last couple of days have not been, in my mind anyway, my personal view, a great time to lock. About 2-3 weeks ago was really optimal over the last month or two to get your lock in. Right now it's kind of like, let's wait and see.
Well, let's point out something here. Okay, the volatility, right, for you and me and my retirement portfolio takes a little bit of a hit.
Yeah.
But volatility in the market, somebody's still making money.
Yeah, a lot of people.
I mean,
a lot of people miss that. So yesterday was a fairly large down day on the four indices, if you will. Over 3% on one, close to high twos on another, and that's down on the chart, on the graph. And if you were to sell on that day, had you had bought the stock at the higher price a week or two or prior, you would have, quote unquote, you not quote unquote, you would have lost. You would have a realized loss in money. And a lot of people think, that might be in the Dow, it might be in the NASDAQ, it might be in the S&P. And they just think maybe the money goes to that market. We all need to remember that when one person's account is down, another trader's account is up exactly that same amount. So the media, the majority of the people I talk to are really alarmed that I'm down, it's down. I'm losing all this money. I don't hear the conversation so much about who made all that money on that day.
Because it's got to go somewhere.
It's going somewhere.
It just doesn't disappear.
It doesn't disappear. It's not a race. Just someone very close to me in a short period of time ago made the mention that all this wealth was just erased. No, your wealth might have been erased. Somebody else just made a ton of money. Someone's buying an island. Like right now, an island is pending that was for sale just a couple days ago. Like it's crazy stuff. But
because if you have $100, right, and you lose, let's say you lose 20% and you're down to 80. Somebody got that $20.
Absolutely. And nobody talks about it. The media is like, hey, let's remember it. And I'm not perfect on this. I'm
Right.
pretty close.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, 3 financial institutions in the United States
Right.
control 80 or 86 or
something like that.
a ridiculous amount of all stock traded in all of the entities. So 3 institutions control the open and close price of almost any stock you would be talking about. So I'm referring to basically stocks over $10, stocks that have a minimum of 500,000 shares traded on average per day, and like normal criteria. Any of the stocks that you're talking about with your friends and peers, like the big 7, like all the normal companies that you know, they're the stocks that institutions trade, that your retirement has, the pensions have, your financial advisor has, your ETF has, your you know, any of these things that your 401k and stuff is in. All of those stocks are traded by only 3 institutions, make the call of what's going up and what's going down. So every major name stock that you would consider trading, that wasn't just, you know, hey, let's bet on, you know, Mr. Ed in the fifth or something like that. The open and close price is set by an institution that knows that when they sell it down or start to sell it off, it's going to create exactly what you see in the market. So they might be, nobody wants to talk about this. They might be selling your shares at a loss, but also maybe buying at the end of that day those same shares back for themselves and riding it up the next day. So all this volatility we've seen over the last week, your portfolio, if you chose to sell it when it's down, somebody's buying it and pushing it back up. Where are those conversations?
They don't exist. And matter of fact, until you brought it up with me this morning, I mean, I hadn't even thought through that. You know, I hadn't thought through that because the money's got to go somewhere. Somebody's got the money. The money that I lost, somebody has.
Someone now has that.
Somebody now has the money. All the money that I may have lost in the stock market, somebody now has that. So that gets us back to, okay, now we're in the mortgages and the housing industry. I think we've seen housing stay pretty steady and still gain equity, at least in our area. It seems that that's been
absolutely
what I've seen here. And I think that's a general trend across the United States, where we've seen houses gain equity or at least stay steady. We have seen, at least early on, we did see more houses come on the market for sale. And yet, you know, the bond market is still high. We expect to have downward pressure. You know, we've got volatility in the stock market, which also kind of contributes to all of this as well. So where are we going? Where do you think this is going to wind up in mortgages at the end of the day? How do you think this is going to play itself out?
My personal view is ultimately it's going to be very positive for real estate and housing in the United States. And that plays also into, I think it's going to be really positive for the economy as a whole. People forget to mention that every time a house sells, from what I'm taught or told or showed, that touches like really like 2/3 of the economy. So every time a house is built or sold, you know, there's a new welcome mat, there's a new hose reel, there's a new set of curtains, there's someone had to design it, a truck driver had to drive the stuff out there. If you buy a house in a pre-existing home, you're now getting new stuff for it, you're updating stuff. Housing touches so much of the economy that when housing is stagnant, when the rates were up, and we've the last 2.5 years, we've had historical 25-year highs in the mortgage interest rates, which has really slowed down the U.S. housing.
But it slows down the economy. It's because the number I had heard, and I think it's locally, that they say that every house that sells affects 15,000 people, employed people.
We're exactly saying the same thing.
I think that's the number that I was told is like 15,000 people in your local economy, every single house that's sold is affected financially.
That's right.
And it's the peripherals that you're not paying attention to.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Absolutely.
the painters that come in to repaint, the finishers that refinish the hardwood floors, the carpet people who lay down the carpet, the curtain people, the window people, the window cleaners, the gutter cleaners, right? The roofers,
The car dealer that sold the commercial truck that brought the contractor
Right.
out there, the service guy that works in the
right.
the
It's
truck
a
place to
huge-
service it for them because there's more miles on the
and
truck.
people don't understand that one house affects
Everything.
everybody.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
so if you think in the triangle,
Mhm.
we sell thousands of houses a year.
Mhm.
Well, what does that do to your economy? And it doesn't matter where you live, by the way, in the United States. Every time your house is sold, you've just impacted positively the economy in your
Absolutely.
area.
Absolutely.
It's so critical to us.
So even though the Fed, to slow or fight inflation or counter inflation or whatever the verbiage they want to use on their plan was they did that by quote unquote raising the interbank offering rate, the rate at which the Fed loans banks money, the rate at which banks loan peer banks money. They chose to do that to slow the economy. But in my mind, my own personal view is that takes a huge amount of time to go into effect. So the federal interbank offering rate is not necessarily mortgage rates, but it affects the rate at which all the businesses have access to money, startups, existing businesses. It eventually does flow and affect the consumer, but in a super delayed period of time. And here's why. So the Fed says, hey, we're now this month raising the interbank offering rate, the Fed rate, 25 basis points. So now let's say you're a bank out there. You might not need to borrow money from the Fed for 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So now the next time you borrow money from them, your cost of capital just went up. So now you're going to take some time and reposition your rates to consumers. So now maybe next month you've built that into your products. Now you're waiting for someone to come in to get the business loan, and he comes in and it takes 30, 60 days to close that loan. And the effect of that is really, 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 really delayed. And my personal view is the Fed raising that rate, the market seeing mortgage interest rates going up. I really believe they used pressure on the bond market, raising of the mortgage interest rates to put pressure for mortgage interest rates to come up, is really what slowed the economy. So even though they talk about the funds rate, I really believe the mortgage interest rates going up over the last 2.5 years had a much bigger impact on the economy than even the federal interbank offering rate did. That's my personal view. And
well, this makes sense when you start thinking through this. I'm as I'm listening to you, because one of the things that makes sense to me is I buy money at a particular rate. All right, as a bank, I'm buying money at a particular rate. Right? And how much money I have left, I have to keep it at that rate in order to, whether up or down, whether I bought it cheap, whether I bought it expensively. I've got X number of dollars that I've got to get rid of at that rate. When I've emptied that bucket or come close to emptying that bucket, and I have to buy new money at a new rate, if I buy that money cheaper, right, and I have it, well, now my interest rate will drop because I bought the money cheaper than the last bucket I brought in, because it's a new bucket, right? I know this is an oversimplification, but I'm trying to make it simplified for everybody, that how a bank or lending institution, the bucket that it costs them to purchase that money, right, until that bucket runs out, right, they're not buying more money at a cheaper rate and convoluting it. They got to get rid of that money at that rate. Now they buy a new bucket, whether it's higher or lower.
Their cost of capital. So their existing cost of capital is what it is until they get new capital. You're exactly right. Put a different term on it, but your analogy, your example is spot on.
Right.
That's
yeah,
it.
it's the bucket of money that
Yeah.
the bank has and how much it costs that bucket cost. The new bucket is going to be a different cost, which changes, and that can take, and that's where it takes time, because how long it takes you to get rid of this bucket before you buy a new bucket.
So your example is great, but let's back up a couple of years. So you go back a couple of years ago when money was at the all-time low, when mortgage interest rates were at 3%, when the cost of capital was essentially nothing. Well, all these companies went through an expansion 3-4 years ago. Remember when everybody was buying everybody and they were paying these ridiculous amounts for these other companies? The reason they were doing that because the cost of capital was almost nothing. You were able to borrow money the cheapest historically ever, like not recently. They were historical all-time lows. The cost of capital was down. Everybody had money. Everybody was trying to stuff money in your pocket, get another house, get another car, or just, don't worry, finance is cheap, 0%. Like the money was cheap. Well, then the Fed raised the rates, the cost of capital started going up. And now all of a sudden you're hearing pressure on all these companies. You're hearing about companies having to really change what they're doing because their cost of capital, their debt, and generally debt at a business isn't 30-year fixed kind of money. It's only fixed for a short period of time. And then they're forced to refinance that to a current rate. So all of these companies that had free money, if you will, or super cheap capital, now their cost of capital went up 2, 3, 5, 10 times what it was. Now all of a sudden everybody's worried about cutting costs and stuff. They're cutting costs in other places because they have to pay the higher price for the debt. And now they're passing that on. And do you think any of the companies are actually paying that? No, of course not. They're passing it on to the customer. So that's why the cost of everything, the inflation, has gone way up because they're passing that on to everybody. So.
And that's why our interest rates are not at 3% right now. It's why that's currently happening.
Significantly higher,
significantly higher, more than double than what we had. So this is the question then that people now ask. They go, okay, all right, I got it. Mortgage rates, hopefully they're going to go down. I mean, all indicators are that it should go down. But purchasing a home versus renting a home, that's a good idea?
Yeah. So I ask customers every day. I literally ask customers, whether they're the first-time home buyer, move-up buyer, fifth house. For me to help them with a mortgage, it's important for me to understand what they're trying to do. And I ask people every day, why are you buying the house? And the answers I get are great, but they're all in a unique area, if you will. Most people say, oh, well, I just want something that's mine. Or my parents owned a house and I always thought it was a good idea. I wanted to own a house. Or I want something I can do this with, or it's usually some answer that has nothing to do with finance whatsoever. And it's important that people remember why you buy a home in the United States. Why do you buy a home? Well, the truth is, in my mind, it's for 2.5 reasons.
Okay. 2.5. Okay.
2.5 reasons.
Lay this on me, Chris.
So first and foremost, particularly in our footprint, is appreciation of the asset. If you buy, say, we'll use round numbers. Let's use 300,000 as your purchase price. It's modest. It's barely, you can barely get a house for that in our footprint at this point. Definitely up over prior years. $300,000 house, even in the last 2 years, particularly at that entry level price point, because there's such a lack of housing, even at mortgage interest rates at a 2.5-year high, at a 25-year high over the last 2.5 years, I should say, we've seen at least 5% plus appreciation on that $300,000 house. So that $300,000 house at 5% appreciation, that's $15,000 a year that it's likely going up in value.
Right.
So that's the first and main
Great
reason.
investment tool.
Yeah.
So what you just said is, I mean, because where are you going to get 5%?
That's right.
I mean, as a regular person, where are you going to get a 5%? Right.
Good. So let's go back. So you're a renter and you want to buy a house, and I asked them, well, how much are you paying in rent? Well, we're paying $1,500, $1,800 in rent, and they're really apprehensive to buy a house because they could have a $2,500 or $2,800 payment, and they don't want their housing cost to go up significantly because that's their discretionary money. And I ask them, I'm like, well, when you rent a house, what do you get for that $1,500 or $1,800 a month? Let's just say it's $1,500 to keep the numbers round. And they really don't have anything. I say, I'll tell you what you get for $1,500 a month. You get a place to sleep 31 days out of the month, couple times a year, about half of the year. You get a place to sleep for 30 days out of the month, about 5 or 6 months out of the year. And then once a year, you get 28 or 29 days,
right,
a place to sleep. That is all you get for your $1,500. When you buy a home, your cash flows might be higher, meaning you might have a higher payment. Before that $2,500 payment, going back to the appreciation, the 2.5 reasons you're buying a house, first and foremost, the appreciation. Secondly, the forced savings account. What do I mean by a forced savings account? When you have a mortgage, a portion of your payment is going directly towards principal on the house. That means you're building equity in the house. That's no different than you putting money into a savings account. So let's say on that $270 whatever $1,000 loan, $300 a month in your first payment goes towards principal. That's like you're putting money in a savings account. Yes, it's equity in your house. No, it's not super liquid like in your bank account, but it is yours and it is equity. Where your rent check, you get no equity out of that whatsoever. Every month on the first, it starts over and you get a place to sleep and that's it. So now that you own that $300,000 house, first and foremost, you're getting appreciation. Let's just say on the low end, in a really tough market in our footprint, it's been roughly 5%. A lot of people in real estate will argue, particularly here, it's significantly higher than that.
Right.
But we'll just use that for illustration purposes. In addition to that, you're getting roughly $300 a month day one. And as you go through the amortization schedule, about halfway through the loan, about half of your payment is principal and forced savings, and your last payment on the loan is all principal. So yes, that changes in the amortization schedule, but for illustration purposes, I'm going super conservative. The most conservative appreciation in our area and the least amount that's ever going to go during your payment into equity, roughly $300. 300 times 12, it's $3,600 a year. We had about 15,000 in appreciation, and many people are able to write off the interest they pay on your loan. That interest is allows you to write off currently in the IRS. If you're itemizing, you can write off 10,000 in income as a deduction. So this interest, you can write off 10,000 in interest, which reduces your taxable income by $10,000. If you're in the 35% tax bracket, that's roughly $3,500 you're saving in federal income taxes. You divide that by 12 months, roughly 300 again. So you now have the 15,000, which what's that, like, $1,400 a month. 15,000 divided by 12. So let's just round numbers, say that's $1,200 a month.
Okay.
It's even less, right? There's your $1,200. Then you're getting another $300 in forced savings, which is super low end of that calculation. Then you're getting another $300 in tax savings. That's the half of a reason, because not everybody's writing that off, right? So we'll only give it 2.5. So I just showed you how owning that house is giving you close to, $1,200 plus 300 plus 300. So that's $1,800 a month. I just showed you how owning that house, even though the cash flows and the mortgage payment might be $2,500 a month, how it's giving you $1,800 a month in financial benefit. Where when you were renting the home, the only thing you got for the rent was a place to sleep for maybe 31 days in the month. So owning the house, the reason you're buying the house instead of renting the house is for the appreciation of the asset first and foremost, for the forced savings, the portion of your payment that's paying down. And the other half of a reason is the income tax benefit. So that they're the reasons. If you're not getting appreciation, if you're not, portion of your payment's not going towards principal, and if you don't have the option to get an income tax savings, the truth is you are better off renting than owning. When you rent a home, you are a phone call and 2 days away from any catastrophe being fixed. Hot water heaters running water all over the floor.
Right. Right.
Dial the landlord. Within 2 days, probably going to be fixed. It's done. HVAC problem, the air conditioning's not working. Dial the landlord.
Right.
In 2 days, probably have cold air blowing again in there.
Right.
Roof's leaking. Dial the landlord. So when you rent a home, you're a phone call and 2 days away from any catastrophe being fixed. When you own a home, you're a phone call, a check, and 2 days away from any catastrophe being fixed.
Right.
So ownership of a home does have cost. You do have to be able to maintain the home. You do have to be able to cash flow the monthly payment. But even in the worst economy we've seen for buying a house in the last 25 years, I can show you how owning the house really almost pays for itself. And if you're to look at it in a slightly better environment, when the appreciation's a tiny bit more, when you get into, a couple years into your amortization schedule, and now $500-600 a month is going towards principal, it's easily giving you a financial benefit more than your monthly cash flows. So owning the home is generally, when you speak to financial planners, advisors, people in finance, owning the home is generally one of the biggest wealth builders of all the tools you're going to use as you head towards retirement. Owning the home is really just, it's key to building wealth towards retirement years.
There's one other reason.
Let's hear it.
That you gave me this morning. And that is that when you purchase a home, your payment doesn't change.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And nobody ever thinks about this, but everybody's complaining how rents are going up, cost of everything going up, inflation's going up. Let's key into a really important fact. And thank you for reminding me about that. When you buy a home as a first-time home buyer, you just fixed your housing cost for the rest of your life. The rest of your life. Like nobody sells that. Nobody talks to anybody about that. It might not be your dream home. You might not aspire to be there the rest of your life. But the minute you bought that house and it was yours, no matter what, your payment is not going up for 30 years. And then after 30 years, what happens to your payment?
You have none.
It actually goes away. So buying a home, it's so profound. You literally are fixing your housing cost for the rest of your life, no matter what the economy does, no matter what interest rates do. If you get a 30-year fixed mortgage and buy a home and pay it on the normal schedule, in 30 years, the principal and interest payment is gone. You just have to maintain taxes and insurance on the house. You don't have a landlord raising your rent. You don't have, you literally, the worst case scenario, you now have a place to live and it will never, ever go up.
That's so beautiful. I mean, 4.5 reasons now, but or 3.5 reasons now. But I mean, that's so important for people to hear that, because what have we seen interest rates do year after year? I mean, rental rates do year after year after year. They've all gone up and up and up. They've all gone up.
Yeah.
You bought a house, you stay in it for 30 years. guess what? Your payment doesn't change.
No. Now today, on this day in 2025, with the rates where they are, and you look at that and you're aspiring to have a house, but that mortgage payment is $2,700, and you like paying $1,800 in rent, and you're justifying it like your rent's going from $1,800 to $2,800. No. You're reallocating your cash flows from literally lighting a check on fire every month to investing it in something that's building value and fixing your housing costs for the rest of your life, and giving something that's yours, something that you can feel good at, and all those other things that people add to it.
The answers that you get, by the way, they fall out of the first 3.5 things. And so they're not looking at it from that financial arena where they should be going, oh, wow, I got appreciation, I got a fixed payment, right? And you start going through all those things and you go, well, homeownership makes sense. Here's the other thing, though, that maybe we're not talking about that's also an added benefit. Reality is your payment of your house can go down, because if interest rates go down and you refinance, by the way, when are your rents going to go down? Because I mean, think through this, right? Let's say we're at 6-7% interest rate right now, right? Let's say we're somewhere in there. I'm guessing that's kind of where I haven't looked at it today.
That's a great ballpark.
So let's say they decide that we're going to change the interest rates. We're going to lower the interest rate. You go and refinance now at 4%. What just happened to your monthly
payment's going down?
Your payment went down. What rental place do you live in, ladies and gentlemen? What place that you live in where the landlord goes to you and go, by the way, got to tell you, interest rates have gone down. We're going to lower your rate.
Nope. You notice he pulls up the next time in a nicer car.
He does. He
absolutely does.
He went from the Kia to the Mercedes.
That's right. Or now he's sending someone else to make sure the check is in. You know what I'm saying? Why? He now spends more time in the islands. Back to the islands.
He's buying one.
That's right.
But I mean, but when you start thinking through that, and this is where people got to think through it, and people like to blame real estate agents. You go, every time I ask a real estate agent, it's a good time to buy, they always say it's a great time to buy. Well, it is. I mean, because when you think through the financial end of it, what we just did here, with the 4.5 reasons, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, versus renting, it is a great time to buy.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Like, not everywhere in the country is quite as lucky as we are here. And I'll be the first one to point that out. Certain footprints are under pressure, and I just, I'm hoping that really turns around for them. I don't have a lot of influence. I don't play in that space. But being here, I ask people all the time, like, rates are up, and the housing market might be a little bit slower than it was, and people all the time say, oh, they're waiting. They're using the excuse to buy. Well, now that rates are up, maybe we're going to wait until prices go down a little bit. So all these people that have been waiting for the last 2 years for the mortgage interest rates to go down, or the prices to go down, what they've done is they've just delayed it. And that $300,000 house 3 years ago, a 5% appreciation a year, and it was 315, and then it was like 333 or something, and then now it's 350 something. So that $300,000 house that they didn't want to pay 6.5-7% for 3 years ago is now a $350,000 house, and the rates are still similar. The rent's gone up 3 times over that period of time, and their payment now on the house, now they have to come up with more money to put down potentially, and the difference in 50,000 more in loan amount, it's roughly where the rates are right now, roughly $6.5-7 per $1,000. So if they're borrowing 50,000 more to buy the house, that's roughly $70 per 10,000. 7 times 5 is 35. That's $350. So they waited now 3 years to see if they could get a better deal on a house in our footprint.
Mm.
Now their payment's going to be $350 more than it was.
Mm.
They've just spent another $36 or $50,000. What's $1,800 a month on rent times 36 months.
Right.
Lost all that. Didn't get any appreciation. They would have bought the house at 300. It'd be worth 350 now, plus what they've paid down on the mortgage.
Right.
Not buying a house in the last 3 years in our footprint has literally cost them. I never actually added all that up, but I'm going to wager between rents, lost appreciation. So that's 36,045 plus 50,000 in appreciation. I'm conservatively going to say close to $90,000 to $100,000.
Is that crazy?
Of after-tax money. After-tax money.
That crazy.
So I'm sorry you didn't buy a house 3 years ago when you thought it was
the interest rates were too high.
When it was too high.
Yeah.
Really, it's a bummer.
This has been fun, man. I've had a blast. This has been fun. I mean, first of all, I love it when you educate us, and you do that, and you do that so well. I love having the conversation with you and then really thinking through this, because I think what we do is we just look at the surface and we don't dig deep enough. And you help us do that every time you're on the show, and I'm really grateful for you doing that.
For sure.
Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
My name is Christopher Coy. I'm pretty easy to find. Christopher Coy at TowneBank. You can call me. I'm best on phone. Call me at 919-306-8895. You can look me up on the internet. I'm super easy to find. And just, give me a call, send me an email, give me a text. You can text me at that number. I'm not a hard person to get a hold of. And I look forward to helping you, answering questions or pointing you in the right direction.
919-306-8895.
That's it.
919-306-8895. See, you're supposed to say 3 times.
There we go.
In the radio industry is what you're supposed to do. Folks, it's a show. Thank you so much for joining us. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. I really do appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Everybody watching, thank you so much. Also, we write us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the show via podcast. We would really appreciate that. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody. And we're getting off here, I promise. Where did we go?
No mouse for you.
No mouse for me here. We'll be cutting this at the end of the show, by the way, for those of you on podcast. We went bye-bye. All right, there it is.